Hello and welcome to this video on the examiner's secrets about question 5 of paper 1, and that's the description question and the narrative question. So you should realize by now, if you've been watching my other videos, that you should not do this question last because you will lose marks. You need to do it first, and it counts for 50% of your whole marks for the paper. That's another reason to do it when you're fresh. So what we found in this 2017 paper is that the examiners gave us yet another mode of transport, just like they did in the specimen papers. So that's a heavy hint that the kinds of topic you're going to be given to write about in the photograph are actually slightly boring. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get to in a minute. But so you should expect train stations or airports or boat trips or bus journeys. Places with journeys lend themselves to description as well as storytelling. And the reason is, according to the examiner, is they want to give you situations which are within your experience. So they want you to be able to write about things you're familiar with. Well, that's not bad, but the flip side of that is they don't want to tax your imagination too much, in case you no longer have one. And when I wrote that, I partly meant it as a joke, but it's a serious thing. So one of the most popular people that teachers watch on YouTube is a man called Sir Ken Robinson, who gave a famous speech that's been watched millions of times on TED Talks, and here it's been turned into a kind of animation. And he talks about creativity, or at least what you need in order to have creative thought, which is divergent thinking, the ability to think outside the box, if you like, to make connections, to have different ideas. And he says one of the typical ways is to give people a test where they have to find as many ways as possible of using a paperclip. And what studies find is that if you give these to children at kindergarten, 98% of them come up with so many guesses for how to use a paperclip that they're classed as genius level at divergent thinking. But by the time students are 8 to 10, that's plummeted. And by the time students are 13 to 15, just about your age, they very rarely can do much at all. And his idea, which obviously the examiners agree with, is that all these years in school have actually made you less and less creative. And one of the ways we know that this is true from this exam is that most students simply stick to the image, even though the question doesn't ask you to do that. It just says write about something suggested by this image. And if you've seen my other videos, you'll find lots of ways to write in ways that are interesting to you, just following that suggestion. You do not have to stick to that picture of the train or the bus of the plane or the boat, whatever it is you get given. So take confidence from that. Experiment now so that by the time you come to the exam, you'll feel truly liberated and can have some fun with this question. Right, well, what did the good descriptions look like? What did students do that impressed the examiners? Well, the best answers wrote from different viewpoints. So imagine it was a plane journey. The viewpoints readers might use are, well, the plane's viewpoint. Imagine that the plane had its own imagination. Or one of the TV screens watching the passengers in the plane. Or a passing cloud formation studying the plane as it came by, or a more remote sun's perspective on the plane's journey. So these are the kinds of things where you don't take a literal perspective, you kind of take a metaphorical one to give you a different way of looking at things, because that forces you to be more creative. Hopefully, you can see the exact link between that and the idea that Sir Ken Robinson posed, finding as many uses as you can for a paperclip. Because how those kindergarten children came up with so many uses is they said, well, can the paperclip be 200 foot tall, and does it have to be made of metal? Why can't we make it out of marshmallow or whatever? And so then it becomes really easy to be imaginative. Right, well, the vast majority of answers would be from a passenger's perspective, just a normal bog standard person sitting on the mode of transport. And bear that in mind because the examiner will be bored stiff, even if your writing's really good. It'll just be another example of the same thing. Some students took a more unusual person in the transport, so they do it from a pilot's point of view. You could play around with lots of things if you were wanting to base it on something that would actually have a point of view rather than an abstract idea like a cloud or God. So you might make it a dog, perhaps a blind person's dog, a guide dog that was traveling on the train, or you could have an insect that found itself trapped inside. It's very easy to have real thoughts, as it were, from something that's not a passenger. I said earlier that it's very likely that the question you'll get will always be based around a journey. Well, always might be going too far, but typically based around a journey. And another way of being creative was to see that journey as a metaphor or an imaginative version of a real journey that isn't the routine one of people commuting or people going on holiday. So you could have a plane journey where the passengers are trapped in a kind of hell, or it could be a journey inside the mind of a prisoner dreaming of escape, and this prisoner imagines themselves on the plane. Or it could be a metaphor for the soul trying to enter heaven. Or you could picture it as a screenwriter traveling on the plane, desperately looking around at the passengers, looking for ideas for a film. You get the idea. You can turn this into a more interesting perspective that way. And then finally, we have another way that the examiners try to help you do badly on question 5. So putting it last doesn't just mean that you might be too tired to do it properly or too depressed because you don't think you've done the other questions well enough. It also limits your imagination. So a surprising number, probably the majority of students, although we're not given the number, base their description on the ideas in the text they've just read, because they'll always be connected. And that's another way the examiner forces you not to think originally. They'll always link the picture in question 5 to the text that you've written about in questions 1 to 4. So that's another clue that that text might be a journey of some sort. But even if it's not, they will be linked. And that means thousands of other students will be writing the same sort of description you are because they'll be basing it on that text. So that's another top reason to do question 5 first. It will liberate your imagination and make sure that you're writing something much more interesting than the other thousands of students taking it at the same time. So hopefully you found that useful in knowing what to do in the description question. Good luck in your mock, good luck in the real thing. And in my next video, we will look at the narrative question. Don't forget to subscribe.